All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. And as promised, my guest today is Sarah Smith. So, Sarah, the way it works here, we don't actually kick off until we have 30 people on the stream. So, it takes a minute or two for people to load in. So we can just kind of, talk music or whatever you want.
Sure.
But good to see you again.
Nice to see you too. I'm excited to be here.
We're already up to 25, so people are excited that you're here, and we are at 31. So,
Whoa.
so I guess I overstated when I said it takes a minute or two. I think it took about a minute this time around. But let me get over so I can see the chat here because I don't know where Pasta is. So let me go ahead and just sort of, yep. All right. We're at 31 now. So, good morning. Everybody is saying good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Hi.
So let's kick it off here. Sarah, you've been building a lot of steam right now, which is awesome. Congratulations on the Stranger cover, by the way. For anyone not in the know, that's basically the alternative newspaper of note in the Seattle area. And Sarah Smith was recently on the cover. Sarah, who is running for Congress in Washington's 9th District. Sarah, give everybody a 411 on what you're all about.
Hi, awesome. So I am running on the same slate that Alex Ocasio-Cortez ran with, Adrienne Bell, Lindsey Fagan. It's Justice Democrats and Brand New Congress are the two organizations that are the real turbines in this engine. But I mean, it's a strong, progressive, ambitious platform, and I'm really proud of it. I'm really proud of the movement that we've built. I mean, prior to Alex's win that kind of catapulted us into the spotlight here on the West Coast, we had already been really building a lot of momentum. We'd really been moving forward. Our volunteer force has been incredible. They're really the fuel in all this. Without them, I don't know what we would have done. They really pick up the slack, and they're on the ground all the time. But I mean, we're surging ahead. I'm going to be on Fox News tonight, which is really cool.
I heard about that.
We just did a Kiro primetime radio interview yesterday, and then there was another one that we did a little later that day, and we're doing another one today, and then Fox News tonight, and then tomorrow there's two others that I can't remember, and Ask Me Anything again with our politics on Reddit. So if you're a Redditor, I'm going to be on there again. I think we called it the Redditor, and we've kind of bounced around between a couple of different subreddits, talking politics and answering questions, and it's been really, really cool. It's been a whirlwind, but it's been a really, really rewarding whirlwind.
Well, Get Your News On with Ron does have its own subreddit, so feel free to stop. You're welcome anytime. You're welcome anytime. I am actually embarrassingly bad with Reddit. I don't really. Somebody else set it up, and the first thing they put in it was a tutorial, and it said, "So Ron can learn this."
At least they know who they're catering to, right?
They totally do, and I'm still learning it. But so you mentioned the bold platform. Give people the kind of skinny, and you're kind of talking to a lot of like-minded folks here, but just in case there's any newcomers, give them a snapshot on what that platform's all about.
Of course, it is bold and ambitious. I strongly support single-payer Medicare for all, debt-free education, student debt relief, massive investment in our infrastructure, a federal jobs guarantee, abolishing ICE, full immigration reform, scaling back military spending, shifting military priorities into humanitarianism. It's a really big, ambitious platform, and I know that, but I mean, this is all these things are what people want. They're all both sides of the aisle, red, blue, green, yellow, magenta, whatever you are. These are policies that working people and people that are out doing the labor and building this country on their backs, these are policies that they've wanted to see for years. But we have too many representatives who are under the protective umbrella of corporate ownership. And I mean, the figures that we talk about all the time are, we talk about 80% of the legislation the wealthy and corporations want gets to the floor, but only 30% of legislation that people's want gets to the floor. And I mean, I think a big contributing factor to that is corporate influence and money. Yeah. So part of my bold, ambitious platform is not taking corporate money, and it makes it a hell of a lot easier to say and do things that are real and honest and full of integrity and upfront and just bold and new. And I think that's what we need in Congress. If we want to take it back and we want to reclaim our democracy, we have to start somewhere, and we have to start with representatives setting the examples in their own campaigns.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm actually surprised 30% it's that high. I mean,
me too.
There was that other Harvard study that said public opinion basically means nothing when it comes to
Yeah.
policy. Like public opinion, if anything, it is almost the polar opposite. So let's get specific to the campaign trail. One of the things you've been getting a lot of in the press is people have kind of nitpicked about your experience. They said, like, this is just somebody without legislative experience. She has a working class background. And I understand that critique. I mean, it is very bold to assume that a working class person would understand the needs of working class people. We need a rich person. We need a rich person to tell us what we need and what to think. So how do you combat that? I mean, how do you respond?
We need rich people to trickle down our knowledge to us on what it's like to be working class, right? That's the
They need
theory.
to tell us what's important, what our priorities are, and we just need to rinse and repeat.
Exactly. We just need to shut up and fall in line. So what I say to the experience question all the time is we have all of the experience legislatively in the world in Congress right now, and we're still at a gridlock. We've proven that experience means nothing because you can just look at where our Congress is right now. What matters most is representation. And to say that a working class person's experience as a working class person doesn't matter, that's not just to say my experience doesn't matter. That's to say every single working class person that's desperate for healthcare, that's desperate for student debt relief, that's desperate for a job and a living wage, that their experience doesn't matter. It's to say that the struggle of the 70% of Americans who are carrying the 30% of the wealthy elite on their backs to make this country work, they don't matter as much as those 30%. And so I put my foot down on that experience thing. That doesn't matter. What matters is your vision. What matters is your commitment to your values. What matters is your platform, what you're going to fight for, what you're going to dig your heels in for. And all the experience in the world hasn't given us very many representatives in Congress that are going to do that. So maybe it's time working class people had real representation from their own ranks in Congress. We deserve a voice at the table. And who better than another working class person to stand up and speak for working class people?
That's a damn good answer. Joe, cut that clip there, right there. Don't include my response either. Just right there when she ended with working class people. That kind of nailed it. Yeah. So let's go ahead and get to some viewer questions. And I am by myself today, so you guys are going to have to bear with me. I'm doing this all on my own. Pasta is missing. So, yeah, Dwayne says it's an all ginger Wednesday. That's
oh yeah, huh?
that's fair. That's fair. Let's see here. Guys, keep the questions coming. Oh, and somebody corrected me. And thank you for doing that. So the study that I referenced was actually not Harvard, but it was actually a Princeton study. And that was the study that I referenced. So
okay.
So here's a question from Chris. Will you go after Amazon because of what they have done to Seattle, and what they've done to the homeless in Seattle is disgusting? As I'm sure you already know, that's in reference to the homeless tax that Amazon pitched a big fit about and ended up getting their way.
Oh, yes, the head tax is what we called it. I actually would have liked the scope of the head tax to be more dialed in to focus specifically on Amazon. Because the fact is, these corporations come into cities, they bring in a lot of work, which is great, but they also displace communities. They help with the gentrification of areas that kick out entire neighborhoods. They create a homeless population. They create a false inflation in our housing and rental prices. And they don't do anything about it. They don't reinvest in these communities. They don't reinvest in our homelessness problem. They don't do anything in the community to try and stop the problems that they create. Then they just say things like, oh, it's not our fault there's a homelessness crisis. Yes, it is. It directly relates to you. So absolutely, I want to pursue these kinds of big companies. Jeff Bezos has $150 billion that he's just sitting on. And at a certain point, there's this diminishment. There's this, oh my gosh, I can't think of the phrase, but it basically is diminishing returns. That's the phrase I was looking for. There's a diminishing return with that kind of wealth. He's not creating anything. He's not contributing to the community. He's not putting it back into the community. He's not putting it back into his laborers, and nobody's doing anything about it. I mean, it's not just Amazon you see this kind of thing with. We need to fight back against Apple and their stock buybacks. They spent $100 billion on stock buybacks to falsely inflate their stock prices and bonus out their CEOs and their board members millions and millions of dollars. They spent $30 billion on their employees. That means they spent 3 times as much to give their CEO and executive boards more money than they did on the people that made them that money. And this is our moment as working people to say enough is enough. We're tired of making these people this money and not seeing it come back into our communities, like with Amazon and like with Apple. We're tired of sitting around waiting for their cup to fill up so much that it trickles down to the rest of us. I think it was Pope Francis who straight up said the cup just gets bigger, right? And we need a congressional hold on that cup to shrink its size and force that to come back down into the working people. It's time that we actually got to benefit from the fruits of our labors, that we actually got to have something tangible in our communities that we can show for all this work that we do. These companies build their fortunes on our backs with our labor, our blood, sweat, and tears. They build it with our lack of ability to have families, with our lack of ability to own homes, our lack of ability to get the healthcare that we need. And enough is enough. It's time that the scales tip back in favor of the working people. So absolutely, I would pursue companies like Amazon and Apple that do that kind of stuff and that don't reinvest in their employees and that refuse to provide solid working conditions for their warehouse employees, which is unbelievable. They just eat the fines. Let's give them a fine that they can no longer eat. That's what I say.
So let me ask you this. It's just kind of like I want to sort of peek under the hood because, I haven't been back up to Seattle in a long time or the area. I used to live there. I do miss it. It's a wonderful place. But so Amazon made a big stink about that. And that, of course, was national news. We covered it on this show. We covered it on the Jimmy Dore show. Lots of people were talking about it. There were 600 other businesses that were going to have to pay this tax as well. And it seems like none of them had that big of a problem with it. It seems like Amazon was the only person crying. Now, first of all, is that accurate? I can't say for sure that that's accurate. I mean, it seemed that way from my perspective as somebody who wasn't totally on the inside in the area. And second of all, if so, why do you think that was? What's your kind of insider perspective there?
So Amazon was certainly the loudest. I think there was one other local dealership group that was upset about it because they got affected. And I can understand that. These are medium and large local businesses that actually just function right here in Seattle who do contribute a lot to our local economies. But at the same time, Amazon really was the loudest about it. And I think one of the things that we have here in the Pacific Northwest is we have this idea of responsibility to our community. And so when you have these local medium and large businesses that are affected by it, they say, oh, this is annoying, it's frustrating. But they also recognize that there is a responsibility to the community here because without the local community, those businesses don't exist. And Amazon pitches this big fit because they don't feel any kind of obligation to any local community anywhere. They just kind of move around and displace living people and pay working people a less than living wage and provide them horrible working conditions. And then when people get grumpy enough, they threaten to pack up and leave because they don't actually foster any kind of community here. They don't believe that they're fully invested in this community. I think there's an entire lack of personal responsibility on Amazon's account. And I think that that's why they pitched a big fit is because they didn't feel that personal responsibility. It was the whole like, F you got mine kind of mentality that comes out sometimes. And that's really what Amazon was doing. They were pitching a fit like, got mine, it's your problem that you're homeless. And that kind of attitude, that might have flown in the late 80s and the early 90s, but now we know, oh, wow, it is all of our problem. And Amazon refuses to move and they refuse to transition into the modern age of moral business and moral politics. And our Pacific Northwest businesses knew that. And it's time Amazon learned it too.
Amen. Joe, end that clip there. No, seriously, you're crushing it. This is, I will say, so far, this is the easiest show I've ever done. I should just let you look at the chat yourself, and I can just sign off. You're crushing it. By the way, guys, Pasta has been found. He is currently at Burning Man trying to find his pants, but he has Wi-Fi, so we'll see what he gets into there. He was
covered the important bases.
Yeah,
right.
He was doing catering for some band that I've never heard of. I don't know, but he's good and he's okay. This is a question from Danielle. Great question. What should the progressive strategy be once we get into Congress? Putting a progressive caucus together is a great idea, but it's getting horrendous backlash.
So there exists a progressive caucus already. One of the things that I know, a lot of this is in reference to Alex Ocasio working on starting the brand new caucus is what we called it. Everything was BNC when we all started. So we're like, haha, brand new caucus. How cool would that be? And now she's actually doing it, which I think is really cool. But I mean, this caucus is important because it's one of the ways that we can consolidate a lot of the power of grassroots, no corporate funding progressives. And we can have kind of our group of people and our coalition that we can build on. We can work on legislation together. We can work on pushing legislation together. So I think that does have to be part of it, because we have to have some kind of epicenter for all of this power and influence to be focused. And also having that kind of caucus helps keep us in check, right? So it kind of helps us keep on top of each other. It helps us hold each other accountable. It helps us keep our own legislative views accountable, which I think is really, really important when you're talking about being a legislator and pushing progressive legislation. But the other thing that we need to focus on too is how can we as progressive elected members of Congress get this message to areas where people keep telling us that it's not going to resonate. I mean, I keep looking at Kansas, right? At 5,000 people, 4,000 people showed up in Kansas to talk about Medicare for all, debt-free education, and living wage. And there was some conservative pundit who said she was actually really inspired by it. I mean, we're told all the time progressivism doesn't work in the Midwest. It doesn't work in red states. But the fact is, it does. Yes. And so one of the things that we need to do as a progressive caucus is take that epicenter of influence, that pulpit that we've created for ourselves through the caucus, and use it to amplify the voices of the people in these disenfranchised states. It's important for us to go there and to work with local candidates in other states. When we isolate ourselves to just my state matters, just this other state matters, that's just my district matters, right? We hear that a lot, but this is federal Congress. This isn't just about one state or one district. This is our chance to represent our district's values on a national level. And we need to make sure that we're not just focusing on one state or one area. We need to remember that this is a nationwide cry for help. This is a nationwide need. I mean, you don't just see wage disparity in Washington. You see it in Texas. You see it in Oklahoma. You see it in Missouri. You see it all across the nation. So when we have this progressive caucus formed, one of the other pieces of our strategy also has to be, how do we get in the field with other progressives in these states, and how do we lift them up with us? How do we elevate other progressives at a national level, at a local level, at a state level? How do we help them and empower them to lean on their representatives, to change their stances, to come over to the dark side and vote for progressive legislation? How do we get them to participate in that 30% of the bills that we want hitting the floor? How do we increase that number? And the best part is through constituent pressure. And being a progressive caucus, being willing to go into these states that aren't ours, where we don't really have any skin in the game other than the movement and the message, that's going to resonate with people. That's going to give people the ability to say, wow, there are representatives out there in these parties that get it. How can I get mine to get it too? Well, and it's like help people do these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. It's like what FDR did, like whenever the establishment gave him flack, which they did, even back then, they did, he went straight to the people sitting near a fireplace. And he's like, this is what I want. This is what they want. What do you guys want? And he had the people on his side. He didn't care about the establishment. And I think when people talk about the new left, they talk about how it looks like what happened with the rise of labor in the 30s. And they say that, like when you see something about that in the corporate media, they say that as if it's a bad thing.
Right.
And I say, it's a freaking great thing. We're thrilled about that.
Thing. I mean, the fact is your corporate donors, you can have one corporate donor who gives you $10 million, but he's still only one donor with one vote. And if you go out into the people and you talk to them and you're out there in the weeds meeting people and you meet 10 million people, that's 10 million votes. And dollars can't vote. People can. And people feel disenfranchised and they're sick and tired of the status quo. We need to give them a reason to be excited about new candidates, to be excited about new blood. And we do that by going to their doors. I mean, we do that by being willing to put on our sneakers and go knock some doors with strangers in districts that aren't ours. We do that by going to their farmers markets and talking to them about the issues that matter to them and how we can help their lives improve. And this works in red states and blue states. People want to talk about issues. They're sick and tired of talking about partisanship and which party it should be. I mean, the fact is, working people, whether it's Republicans or Democrats who are in power right now, working people are sick of being sick. They're tired of being tired, and they're exhausted by being exhausted. We're all done, and it doesn't really matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. So being out there as a progressive, talking to the issues, meeting people where they're at, stepping outside our own comfort zones and our own safety nets around our districts, that's what's going to help propel the movement forwards. It's the only way we're going to propel it forwards.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's just the very basic notion. Donald Trump, one of the reasons he won was because he ran on this idea of right-wing populism, which is an oxymoron. But what it proves is that people are ready for real populism. Real populism can win, and it can win in the heartland, and it can win nationwide. So here's a couple questions. Now, Pasta is on mushrooms, so he's doing the best he can. Totally on mushrooms. Dude Poop, thank you for your super chat contribution. Watson, thank you as well for your super chat contribution. And Dude Poop says, I'm a corporate donor. Mr. Broken Oz has a couple endorsement questions here, Sarah. Will Sarah endorse Tamborine Borelli, U.S. House in Washington 10, and Jennifer Ferguson in the Washington Senate? They have nearly identical platforms, should be in coalitions together. Also, Kenneth Mejia in California.
So I definitely love. I've worked with Tamborine and Gigi, and I think Ken Mejia is really, really. I think honestly, what Ken Mejia is doing by bringing the Green Party as a real competitive player in the California Assembly, I think that's so cool. I just think and he seems like such a positive person, and I love that. I love positive people. But I've been working with Tamborine and Gigi. We've been talking about endorsements and things like that in this race. So it is something we are in the process of working on. So
great, cool. What are your thoughts on Nicaragua?
Specifically with relation to what?
All I got is, what are your thoughts on Nicaragua? All right, we'll move on.
I'm not sure. I've never been, and I'm going to just be upfront. I don't know a whole lot about their political climate right now, so I can't really speak to that. But, you know, now it's something to look into, right?
Yeah, totally. We got we got some more on the to-do list.
Yeah, of course, always something.
Well, is there anybody locally that you're really excited about? I mean, someone that always comes to my mind that I am a huge personal fan of, and I got to get her on the show, is Swama Suwant, for instance.
Yes, Shauna's really cool. She's so genuine, and I love that about her. And she doesn't care if you throw socialist at her like a bad word. She's like, fine, yeah, sure.
She wears it. She embraces it.
Really proud of her identity, and I think that's really, really inspiring. And she's in the middle of some of these rallies and these marches and these upsets, and she coordinates them. I just think that's really cool. Locally, there's also Joan Nguyen. He's running for State House in the 34th, and I think he's pretty cool. We got the chance to meet. He's also a millennial younger guy who's running a really positive progressive campaign. I think he's really, really cool as well. So we do have some good progressive candidates. I've talked to some of them, and I've made a few connections with a lot of them, but we've been largely inundated in our own race. But I do pay attention to other people's races, and it is important to me to look at other people's races. But I think Joe's really cool, really chill guy. And that's as far as the inspiring progressive candidates. We also have Mona Das out here in the 40. I think she's running for state senate in the 47th. She's pretty cool. I've met her in person quite a few times. She's awesome. She's really wants to fight for Washington, and I think that's really, really cool. And she's got a strong progressive platform. She's got a big presence, a huge personality. She's very kind. But yeah, there's a few local races that we've had our eyes on, and we've talked to representatives and candidates from.
So, I mean, because seeing what's going on locally, I really hope the kind of seeds that she's planting is catching on, especially since there's so many things up there that have gotten the national spotlight, like the homeless tax and stuff like that. Are you for the abolition of ICE?
Oh, yes. I was the 6th candidate nationwide to announce that I was in favor of abolishing ICE. And I also signed on to the immigration platform for a brand new Congress in November of 2017, which included provisions to abolish ICE. But one thing that I also want to address, too, is it's the side that doesn't really get talked about. It's the side that kind of gets left out, especially with right-wing media and conservative media. It's what next? Right? So we abolish ICE, and then there's this image of abolish ICE, and it creates lawlessness across the land. But
right, because apparently we never had border security before ICE. Don't you remember those days before ICE was a thing? People could just come across willy-nilly. We didn't even know where the United States started. We were just like, are we still in Canada or Mexico? I don't even know. What state is this?
Our borders. We just had laser pointers that cut the borders for us. We just moved them. rotating borders. So one of the things, the solutions to abolishing ICE, and this includes things like abolishing Customs and Border Patrol and abolishing Homeland Security as well. So that's something that also is covered under the Abolish ICE umbrella that also needs to be explicitly stated, particularly by me. But I also want to make sure people know there is a plan for what comes next. We've had this discussion before, and a lot of it involves taking the immigration process and returning it back under the purview of the Department of Labor, which is actually where it was before ICE was created in 2003. My incumbent actually voted to create ICE in 2003, and up until 3 weeks ago, said he would never vote to abolish ICE, and now is like, actually, let's abolish ICE. So I'm like, all right, buddy. But so one of the things we want to do is create the Department of Citizenship, Refugee, and Immigrant Services. And what this would do is it would operate under the Department of Labor. It would work with the Department of Justice and Department of Justice law enforcement, wherever it needed to return people to the Department of CRIS is what we're calling it, the CRIS Department. So this would focus on getting people to apply for visas, getting people to apply for green cards, getting people to apply for citizenship paths, helping with job placements, helping with application processes. This would encourage our immigrant community to join our labor force, and it would give them real, tangible pathways to citizenship or to permanent residency. It would help with things like people seeking asylum, with refugees that are seeking protection, things like that. So it would put it under the Department of Labor and essentially remove it as a security concern and put it into a working concern. And when you couple this department with something like a federal jobs guarantee and a massive investment in infrastructure and green energy, this is going to create a great new labor force for these areas and for these new departments. And you couple that with giving people debt-free education, and that's going to re-educate our own citizenship and our own, and the American people. It's going to put all of us back to work. It's basically going to create so many jobs that we need our immigrant community to be a part of that with us. They're part of what makes America such a great place, right? They make us so awesome. My dad emigrated from the United Kingdom, and he came over here and got his job and worked really hard. And so, I mean, you know, it's important that we have immigrants in our community that are helping build us up. And something like that, no longer criminalizing immigration, no longer treating people who are seeking a better life like they're committing a crime, separating families, ripping people apart, saying horrible things to children. We can do better, and we should do better. And that's kind of what this whole movement is about. It's about not necessarily it's not about not wanting to be the country that we are, and knowing full well the country we have the opportunity to be, and wanting to chase that new America that we want to create for all people, equitably and equally across the board, where we treat people who want to come here with open arms and with a warm welcome, instead of with a cage and their kids thrown in a cell. I mean, we can do better, and so we should do better. And something like abolishing ICE, abolishing CBP, abolishing the Department of Homeland Security, and creating this new department under the Department of Labor that embraces the immigrant community rather than pushes them away is a huge step forwards towards this new America we want to be.
Mm-hmm. So you're doing a Fox News. We're going to take a quick interlude here. You're doing a Fox News spot later, and I feel like I could kind of help the cause by preparing you for some of the stuff they're going to fire at you. You know, I'm sure you've seen it all before. But why not? Why not? You know,
I like being challenged. I think that's important.
I really want to help out too. I'll play the role of the Fox News guy. I would, if I had a stick nearby, I would shove it up my butt just so I could get into character. Like really good for you. Yeah, I'm for the cause. But but you know, you seem to want a lot of entitlements here. How are we going to pay for that? Over to you.
How we're going to pay for it is probably, I know most people would say this is anathema to put out there, but it's actually one of my favorite questions. We never asked how we were going to pay for the trillions of dollars in war in the Middle East. Nobody ever asked when we increased the military budget how we were going to pay for that. And nobody asked how we're going to pay for this military parade. I mean, we have a ton of opportunities to transition how it is we spend our tax dollars, because the fact is we have this economy based on war and violence that no one bats an eye at when we spend billions of dollars in. But when you want to put that money into the working people, when you want to put that money into building up people's lives, that's when we start to question how we're going to pay for it. And I mean, we have a number of different ways. A lot of them, especially something like the federal jobs guarantee, kind of ties in with some modern monetary theory, but we have options as well inside of that too. We have Medicare for all. We talked about, you see, oh, it's going to cost $33 trillion. Well, our current healthcare system costs $47 trillion. So Medicare for all is actually going to save us multiple trillions of dollars. Was it 14 trillion? I'm bad at math.
Even the Koch brothers admit it. The
Exactly.
Koch brothers admit it.
Exactly. And you want to know what you can do with that $14 million in savings? You can transition that into things like the $4.6 trillion we need to invest in infrastructure. You can use that to pay for the $1.6 trillion student debt bubble that's getting bigger every single day. You can use that to invest in green energy. I mean, we cut oil subsidies and we return that money back into the people. We cut corn subsidies and we return that money back into the people. We can reinvest it into green farming methods. We can reinvest it into small farmers that need help right now because of Trump's ridiculous tariffs. When we talk about debt-free education and student debt relief, there's the Wall Street speculative tax. The Robin Hood tax is what the slang term was. And Bernie Sanders pitched this on his presidential trail, and now everyone was talking about it and buzzing about it. And now no one's saying a word. It's 0.2%. So it's 0.2 of a cent for every dollar traded on Wall Street. And that would generate approximately $370 billion every single year. And do you want to know how much it would cost to pay for everybody's college and technical school and vocational school? It would cost $75 billion, which would leave us a little over $260 billion every year to do things like start chipping away at that student debt bubble if we need to invest in government-run childcare, to invest back into our K through 12 education system, to pay for things like mandatory paid maternity leave or in paternity leave and family leave. I mean, there's tons of ways that we can pay for these things, but everyone acts like it's impossible to implement any of them because everyone's afraid to talk about them. But it's not a matter of how we're going to pay for them. It's a matter of actually doing it. We already know how we're going to pay for them. We just have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Right on. So I appreciate you I'm not in Fox News character now. I'll get back there in a minute. But I appreciate you bringing up. I appreciate you bringing up farming because I do think food culture is something a lot of people don't talk about just because it's something that gets overlooked. But it is so connected to so many other issues.
Oh, yeah.
And I really do. I mean, hey, my first EP was called Hippies, Dead Air, and Crop Shares. So, I mean, I'm still in many ways a heartland hippie. But yeah, so I do appreciate you bringing that up. So getting back to the Fox News character briefly, then we'll go back to viewer questions. Blah, 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 word salad, vomit, diarrhea, Venezuela. Run with it.
Venezuela. So there's a key difference to remember, too, with something like democratic socialism versus what happened in Venezuela. Venezuela was hit by a bunch of different sanctions from the United States. Same with Cuba. They were hit with tons of sanctions. And because we are such a terrifying military threat, most of the world followed suit and did the same. So that actually stopped Venezuela from building up any kind of economy. And it wasn't really able to be a player in the world economic stage. And so, of course, it collapsed in on itself. Any country under any kind of government would have collapsed in on itself. It doesn't matter that it was socialism. It's just convenient to throw that word out there and say that's the cause. But that's just patently untrue. It's just false. Mm-hmm. So democratic socialism is really important because it's democratically implementing socialist policies that based on what the people want in a constitutional way. So it makes sure representatives are voting specifically on what people have stated they want when they're out in the communities and how people vote. And that's one of the key differences to remember. Something like over 90% of Americans want legalized cannabis. That's something, or I'm sorry, 60% of people want legalized cannabis, but that's both sides of the aisle. That's Republicans and Democrats. I think it's over 70% of Americans want single payer Medicare for all. I can tell you probably over 85% of people want debt-free college education and student debt relief. I mean, these are policies people have said that they want for years. And democratic socialism says, okay, that's what the people want. That's what we're going to give them. That's what we're going to put into place. That's what we're going to fight for. It's the government's obligation to care for these people and give them the best quality of life we possibly can.
Awesome. So we got some viewer questions here coming in. And yeah, I mean, it's just such a null and void comparison that like anyone can just shut down and be like, look, it was an under-resourced developing place. I mean, exactly. you're just grasping for straws at a comparison.
It's a straw man. That's all it is.
You think that's going to get thrown at you tonight? I bet it is.
Oh, for sure it is. I'm totally used to the socialism question at this point. Yeah. I'm like, if it's socialism to think that we live in such a wealthy country that every person should be able to go to the doctor and nobody should have to die from a preventable illness, then fine. I guess I'm a socialist.
So Kim says, this is a fantastic talk. Thank you both. Thank you, Kimmy. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. Jordan wants to know, any thoughts on Abdul al-Sayed?
I have not personally met Abdul. I follow all his social media and I see him occasionally in some of the chats. So I don't really know him personally, But I mean, I like his energy. I like his policies. I like his vision for his state. I think his heart's in the right place for sure. And I think when you've got someone that's rejecting corporate money and who's got their heart in the right place and their values in the right place, and it shows in their platform, that's definitely somebody worth putting your energy into as a voter and as a volunteer.
So Danielle wants to know, what can progressives do collectively to bring awareness to and rein in the rolling back of free speech and suppression of non-corporate media? This also includes free and open internet.
So we all need to be totally unafraid to blast our congresspersons and our senators' phone lines about net neutrality for sure. That's a huge one. We need a neutral net. It's free speech in the digital age, right? And to pretend that free speech only applies to when you go to, say, a college campus and you stand in the middle of it and start yelling whatever message you want, to say that's the only stage for free speech, that's to completely miss the point of free speech altogether. But in the modern era, in the 21st century, where everyone has the internet in a rectangle, the size of their palms, this is the new forum for free speech, and it must be protected at all costs. So progressives, one of the best things we can do is don't be afraid to call out your senators and your congresspersons. A couple years ago, I actually had an alarm set regularly on my phone with my representative, now my opponent, his number in my phone, and I would call at the same time and I'd say, hey, fight for net neutrality. Hey, fight for net neutrality. Don't be afraid to send emails. Let them know that you're there and you see them and you're watching them. Because if you show up at their town halls and you get on that mic and you say, hey, what are you doing to preserve net neutrality? What are you doing to preserve our free speech in the modern era? These are questions that you can throw at them when they're right in front of you and demand answers for. That's what they're supposed to be there for. That's what town halls are supposed to be. They're supposed to be moments where your representatives can come and talk to you about what they're doing, what they're fighting, how they're fighting it, and hear from you about what's important to you. And showing up is a huge thing. Showing up to these town halls, showing up when they do video town halls, showing up together to protests, showing up to work with organizations that are really getting the ball rolling on these things, and making sure that we're building coalitions as progressives. So it's something I don't think we do enough in the progressive community. Everyone has different organizations that they work with, but we're more powerful if we take all of those organizations and we build them into a collective coalition around an issue. And things like free speech and net neutrality are two of the biggest ways we can possibly form a coalition. And we're also going to get support from independent media, from independent journalists. And in some cases, we'll get friendliness from mainstream media too, whose journalists are also being attacked, because that's something that's huge right now. Is Donald Trump is constantly antagonizing journalists and saying horrible things about them and trying to disregard the freedom of the press, and it's ridiculous. But forming these coalitions, we can build up more of these relationships. We can build up more of our power to protect free speech together. So we are a lot stronger when we build these coalitions and when we come together around an issue, and we don't stop until we've fought and won for that issue. We can't just keep letting things go to the back burner when the next big thing comes up. We have to keep pushing and keep focused.
The sad part about the corporate media is they are so broken beyond repair that at times they prove Trump right, which is disgusting beyond comprehension. It's like, how terrible do you have to be to, and of course, everything Donald Trump says, he's not saying it because they're corrupt organizations. He's saying it because they're not nice to him. It's like he's saying everything for the wrong reasons. But it's like, how broken do you have to be to actually prove this guy right every now and again?
It's really sad too, because what frustrates me the most about corporate media is everything is an 11 on the crisis scale at all times. Every tweet is an 11. Every distraction is a panic moment, and they don't actually focus on the real issues. And that's actually why I love working with independent media. It's why I like working with grassroots journalism, because I come on here and they're like, what'd you think about Trump's latest tweet? They never ask me that. They're always like, what's your stance on helping rural farmers? What's your stance on the tariffs that are going on? What's your stance on factory workers? It's stuff that matters. And grassroots journalists and independent journalists, they know that and they focus on that. So the corporate media drives me nuts because they don't actually focus on issues. They focus on one ridiculous distraction crisis after another, and people are tired of it. They want to hear something tangible and substantial. That's why we're seeing expanded viewership into independent media. That's why more people are doing it. More people are trying to go into independent journalism. It's important. It's important to talk about facts and real facts and to talk about, candidates that actually want to discuss platforms and policies and to talk to solutions to these issues, not just harp on about how the fact that they are issues. We need solutions. We already know what our problems are. We don't need to hear about what our problems are every day. We need to hear about how we're going to fix them. And corporate media it refuses to focus on solutions-based policymaking, and it's frustrating.
Sure. Well, let me ask you this, actually, and then we got a lot of viewer questions, so I want to get back to it. But before we leave the topic, you're doing a Fox News spot later. Has MSNBC or CNN shown you any love?
Heck no.
I mean, I entertain this idea, and I do say this to people, and I think that all cable news is absolutely despicable. They are failing miserably. I go as far as to say what they're doing should not be legal because they're not actually news organizations. Yeah. They have the right to publish whatever they want, but they should have to disclose who owns them.
Yes.
And they should have to disclose the fact that they are, in fact, PR agencies. They're not news organizations. They're just not. They're definitionally not.
There was I can't remember exactly what the context was, but I remember that Fox News eventually said that, they don't have to do this kind of unbiased journalism because they're a media outlet. They're not a news outlet. And that sticks so well in my head because you know what? I don't agree with Fox News, but at least they own it, right?
Yeah, well, that's the most honest they've ever been right there.
Yeah, I know, right?
They've ever been. But here's my thing. I've made this argument, and a lot of people push back against me for this, but I really do stand by it. I think that MSNBC is the most irresponsible. Right now, MSNBC is the most irresponsible of all of them, and they are the one hurting progressives the most because you have to ask yourself, what's worse? The school bully that wants to beat you up, or the person that says they're your friend but stabs you in the back? I would say the person that says they're your friend and stabs you in the back, and that's what MSNBC is. CNN is just the neutral kid standing in the corner doing nothing.
No one's
Fox News is the bully. MSNBC is the one that says they're your friend.
I mean, the thing that
I would say that's the worst.
Oh, yeah. And the thing that comes to mind for me is everyone says the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. And that it makes me think of MSNBC all the time. And then just their focus and the things that they do multiple week-long news reports on for 8 hours a day. It doesn't affect people. It doesn't talk about real policy. It doesn't talk about anything tangible. It's kind of just filler white noise, and it doesn't contribute anything. And they ignore progressives or disparage progressives. And I think that's just kind of sad.
Well, they pretended to not know who Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was, but for some reason, their executives gave Joe Crowley a bunch of money at the last minute.
Yeah, and they had no idea who she was.
They had no idea who she was. They just randomly happened to give him a bunch of money. I'm sure it had nothing to do with them being scared he might lose.
No, of course not.
So, before we get back to viewer questions too, one other thing I wanted to ask you since net neutrality came up. I am all about net neutrality policy. I support it 110%. What I am trying to do right now in my community is going a step further, getting municipal broadband.
Municipal broadband.
Via Chattanooga. Would you support a statewide municipal broadband idea in Washington State? I think we need to start at the state level.
Yes, it's got to start at the state level. I mean, after we saw Ajit Pai and his whole thing about hating net neutrality. I mean, multiple states, even red states, passed mandatory net neutrality laws. And that tells me all of our legislators in Congress know the people want net neutrality, but the Comcast giants of the world don't want net neutrality. So our federal representatives are like, oh, there's nothing we can do. Yes, there is. We know there is. But we need to remember that we also have the advantage of states' rights here. This is why we have the two separate governments, is you have the state federal government, because when the federal government fails to protect the people, the state government can step up to the plate and fill its shoes. And this is the perfect time for state governments to step up to this plate. And if they should take a swing at anything and they're not going to do statewide single payer, they should fight for municipal internet. This is where we should be putting our state funds, is municipal internet. So absolutely, I would support that in Washington State for sure.
Nice. Well, let's keep in contact. I'm trying to figure out how to get something going in California.
Yes.
I'm trying to get Scott Wiener, a guy in San Francisco. I'm trying to get him on the show to talk to him about it because he's the one that really authored the solid net neutrality bill.
Oh, wow.
So I'm trying to get him on to kind of talk about this, but he hasn't been responsive as of now. But hopefully we don't agree on everything. So it might be, but Pasta has made it very clear that Ron wants to talk about net neutrality and municipal internet, where you guys are on the
Awesome.
same team, and that's what he wants to base the episode around. So anyway, Jameson says this Washingtonian will be donating to your campaign right after this. Stay strong. And I hope you crush Adam Smith like the weak corporate stooge that he is. You don't need to respond to that part. You don't need to. You
Oh
can
my
be
gosh.
diplomatic.
This is that. Thank you so much. Our campaign really truly runs on individual donations. We really do reject all PAC money and money from deep pocketed donors. I mean, we are running on a shoestring budget, but nobody's taking a salary. We're all volunteer. I'm not taking a salary. We're putting every dime we have into being out, meeting people, and talking to voters, because that's what matters to us. And so money like that, it helps us do that. It empowers us to be able to do our jobs and get the message out there. So thank you.
What is your plan for going fully green by 2030? If we don't, we're pretty much all dead. So this is important.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, Alex Ocasio beat me to the punch on it. She talked about how the 20 by or 100 by 50 bill it's a great bill, but it's 50 years, and we don't really have 50 years. We need to do it sooner. And not only do we need to, we can. We just have to end the subsidies that we keep giving to oil barons and oil companies, and we need to turn around and reinvest those subsidies into green energy. One of the best ways we can sell this is it's not just that it's about saving the planet. It's not just that it's about saving the climate. We also have to talk about it in terms of job creation too. Because I mean, Joe Manchin tries to sell it like coal creates jobs. No, I guess. But for every one job created by the fossil fuel industry, the green energy industry creates 4. So it creates 4 times as many job opportunities for high-paying living wage jobs for real people. And it creates
sustainable jobs. Jobs that are going to stick around. They're not going to be like temp jobs on a pipeline.
Exactly.
That, they pay you a nice sum for a little bit, and then they're gone.
Exactly.
And there's a bunch of health risks. This is a sustainable job.
We're always going to need people to manufacture solar panels. We're always going to need people to watch those systems, to repair them, to maintain them. We're always going to need people to build them. We are always going to need these jobs once we create them. So the best way to create a sustainable green economy is to recognize that we have a desperate need for it right now. We don't have a full 50 years. The 100 by 50 bill it really is a great start. And I think it is an awesome jumping off point. I think it was a good bipartisan way to sell that kind of bill, but we need to do it sooner, and we need to do it faster, and we need to do it much more aggressively than we are. So I absolutely support a bill. I think the figure that came out, we could do it in as few as 6 years, is one of the figures that came out if we had a massive investment and we cut those oil subsidies and reinvested them into green energy and then put massive government investment into that sector. We can do it, so we should do it. That's why I've lived my life for a long time, and that's why I plan to use my representativeship.
Are you open to a new People's Party? The corporate Democratic Party is dead. We know this because they will confirm yet another Trump Supreme Court nominee.
Of course they will.
The light ones.
Yeah, I know, right? Oh, God. So I absolutely support the inclusion of third parties in our process. I think that third parties are really, really important. I think what they have to offer is the ability to get outside the box that we've created with this idea of Democrat and Republican. It's a false dichotomy we've created. We basically have 2 businesses that tell us who to vote for. And third parties like the Green Party, like the People's Party, like even the Libertarians. I mean, these are new parties where people can actually see a group that reflects their views, reflects their values, and vote for their candidates in a meaningful way. We need things like ranked choice voting. We need to be able to bring in the power of these third parties and let them be truly viable options in these races, not just be like, sure, you can file and run. They need to have the ability to get on the equitable platform and amplify their voice. I mean, we have these incredibly expensive elections process. We should be having publicly funded elections. Seattle has our voucher system. I don't see a reason why that couldn't work on a national scale. There's other countries around the world that have multiple different parties, and they all have equitable ability for people to vote for them and vote them in. And we should be reflecting those values. We should be reflecting our diversity of political views and our diversity of political opinions, because no one Republican is the same as the next. I mean, Rob Ryerson down in Arkansas is my Republican buddy from Brand New Congress, and he certainly disagrees with everything Paul Ryan stands for, but there's no way for him to express that in his vote. And opening up our political process and allowing third parties to have a real shot at winning these races and including them in the conversation and giving them the media time and the airspace that they need to be amplified and to be lifted up it's essential to a true democracy.
Absolutely. What is your stance on public housing?
Ooh, my stance on public housing. I do support public housing. I believe that one of the ways that we're going to help solve our homelessness and our houselessness crisis is, I mean, by a total new investment in social housing. I think it's, what is it, 10 million homes in 10 years is what we need to build in order to fight back against the homelessness crisis. We also need to be penalizing land persons who are leaving long-term properties vacant because they falsely inflate their rents and they just sit around and wait for someone to come along who's desperate enough to pay it. It's almost predatory, and it creates another housing shortage in these metropolitan areas. There's apartment buildings in Seattle that are half empty because they refuse to adjust the rent because they want someone who's going to pay more money, and it's displacing people. It's leaving people out on the street who shouldn't be there. There's the rejection. People reject anybody who has government assistance for housing and things like that. That should absolutely be, they claim it's something else, but I mean, if you qualify for government assistance for housing, why doesn't the government just have the housing? Because it saves everybody that weird dichotomy that they run into where these land people don't want to rent anyone on government assistance. And they discriminate against these people, and it disproportionately affects especially communities of color, and it's abhorrent. So if instead of offering vouchers, we offered an actual roof over people's heads, we'd have a lot of these crises solved and taken care of. Because when you give people shelter and food, they want to work, they want to be a part of the community, and they have that ability then. It's two things that they don't have to worry about.
Well, and it's one of these things too. 44% of homeless people have jobs.
Yes.
I mean, this is one of those things. We've gotten it to a point of crisis because we don't have living wages, because we have no workers' rights whatsoever.
Mhm.
That we've gotten to this point, and we need kind of just a reinvestment in social welfare.
Of course. And everyone's almost afraid of something like social housing, but isn't all housing in its own way a social thing? I mean, it all kind of is. And we don't have any kind of mandates on these developers to account for the communities that are already there. We need to keep these developers that are making millions of dollars accountable for their displacement of entire neighborhoods and communities. We need to make sure that when they go in with these housing plans, that they have a sub plan in place for how to retain the people that already live there, how to combat these kinds of things that are putting them out and displacing them. I mean, we also need to have a tenant's bill of rights that I actually think should extend to small business owners who rent their business space. But we need to protect people from predatory eviction processes, from predatory land persons. We need to make sure that 15 days is not enough time for someone to find a new home, especially in a city like Seattle. It's not enough time for people to realistically move and relocate, but there's tons of areas around the country where 15 days is all the notice they have to give you. I think in Seattle, it's 21 days. Have you ever tried to find a house in 21 days?
Mm.
That's ridiculous. And I mean, we need to protect renters as much as we protect homeowners. Both are important, both are necessary, both create a rich economy. But when you're negatively affecting one so they can never become the other, when you're fleecing renters who already don't make enough money to make ends meet, you're fleecing them for 80% of their monthly income. I mean, they're never going to be able to save money to become a homeowner. And that was always part of the dream, right? Everyone can
Yeah.
own a house of their own. But social housing will empower people and working people, especially, to be able to save, to be able to become a homeowner. It'll give them new pathways. We can give them different kinds of loans. We can give zero interest loans to people who can support these payments. I mean, we have the ability to provide real housing for people, so we should. And it's frustrating and ridiculous to think that we can't when we absolutely can.
Right on. So we are pretty much out of time. So I'll close on this. Chris says, have her back again soon, please. And of course, Sarah, you are welcome back anytime. But Chris, it's not going to be
So.
super soon because she has she's got a primary to win.
Hopefully after
So
August
she's
7th,
kind of
I can come back.
absolutely. She's a little busy at the moment. So please use these last couple minutes to plug everything you need to plug. Where can people learn more about you? What can they do to get involved? What do Washingtonians need to know to go vote?
Oh boy. All right. So votesarahsmith.com. That's the way you're going to get to learn about me the most. The biggest thing we need right now, huge canvassing team, we really need phone bankers. You can do it from home, anywhere in the country. You can do it in the comfort of your own pajamas. I have definitely done it in my workout clothes. Votesarahsmith.com/call is how you can join our phone banking team. There's instructions. We can walk you through it, or you can email us at contact@votesarahsmith.com, and we can get you set up with a texting campaign too. So if you're more of a texter, which I know a lot of us Washingtonians are, you are more than welcome to get on board and help us do text campaigns and things like that. Primary last day to return your ballots, because in Washington, we are in all mail-in state. So last day to return your ballots is August 7th at, I believe, 7 p.m. Most of them are going to be located outside your local libraries. You can go to the Secretary of State website and find your closest ballot box. But really make sure you're returning those ballots. We got to get them in. We got to have a strong showing. I want to come out of this primary swinging. I want to show my incumbent who thinks this isn't a national movement just how wrong he is. And the best way we're going to do that is by getting those ballots in those boxes before August 7th.
Sarah, thank you so much for doing this, and I wish you all the very best. VoteSarahSmith.com. Guys, check it out. Sarah, best of luck to you. I am rooting for you big time. You're one of the good folks. You know, you're one of the people that's really doing the work, and we need those ideas in office. So thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for fighting the good fight, and thank you to everyone on your staff who is working tirelessly as well. You guys have been putting up an amazing effort. And, I'm really hoping for a victory on Tuesday here. Guys, this has been Get Your News On with Ron. You know the drill from me. World's first viewer curated show. Want to support this on the sustainability level? Patreon.com/Ron Placone. Shout out to our sponsors, ZT.com. They make amazing tea. And BetterHelp.com, offering affordable online therapy. If you need the help, do not be shy. Please get it. Sarah, VoteSarahSmith.com. Thank you so much. Best wishes. Guys, we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Peace.